We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams.
In this session of Shots Talk, I'll be speaking with Matthias Eckhardt. Matthias is a German-based compositing supervisor at Trixter. So I'll be talking to him about how he composited two awesome shots from the film Shang-Chi, which released in 2021. We'll be talking about his process, what he had to hack in Nuke while compositing the shots, and what he misses about being a compositor. At the time of the recording this, Trixter were actually looking for compositors, so if you're interested in working with Trixter, then definitely go on their website and reach out to them. Enjoy the first shot talk, and here are the shots. So first of all, Matthias, was there anything that you did in the comp of the two shots that people might not expect you to have done at all?
So in general, I think for a compositor, everything is quite obvious, but for a viewer, it might be a little bit surprising. There are a lot of different additional layers to kind of put nearly invisible stuff in there that gives the whole scene a little bit more depth and breaks up some of the areas. There are a lot of additional leaves, a lot of additional like beetles, birds in the background, additional smoke elements to give everything a little bit more atmosphere, to create a little bit of a feeling of something happening in the air. And a lot of those things were either from effects or directly done in Nuke with particles.
And could you use those Nuke particle simulations between shots? Because obviously you had these two shots. So with the leaves falling, was it kind of, okay, we've got the sign off on this Nuke particle like sim with the leaves falling. Could you then move on to the next one? Or was it kind of particular shots that needed it?
No, the setup was done in a way that it could be reused. So it was pretty much just a Nuke particle setup that could be plugged in and played on pretty much every shot that it was copied to.
Yeah.
Usually what I try to do with those kind of things is to make it as easy to copy as possible so that everyone else has an easier time to work with it. And I'm trying to keep it as clean as humanly possible with the time available. So I think most of the elements were pretty much split up into different areas of the shot. There were parts that were specifically for the foreground that needed a little bit of repositioning depending on how everything looked like through the cameras of the different shots. But the midground parts and the far background parts, they probably didn't change. So I think they were pretty much plug and play, and they were built into the whole deep setup that we had, and everything was pretty much automatic from that point onwards.
Nice. You just drop it in and it would be held out correctly because you were set your script up with deep in the first place.
Yeah, pretty
nice,
much.
Man.
I think most of the stuff was pretty much automated once we got to this stage of the project. Once the look was defined in one of the shots, the rest was pretty much just optimizing it for the whole sequence and making sure everyone has an easy time to populate the shots.
See, now that one shot that you mentioned was a shot I worked on for like 3 months, look developing the thing, and your shots look way better than mine. So I guess, is there anything, I mean, actually, I remember originally Dominic, the VFX supervisor, I kind of put the little lens flare sun above the hill, and he kind of mentioned it looked a bit too much like a sweet corn advert or like something. And it was like, yeah, that's not the look. And then we did a whole bunch of different magical looks and things like that. And I mean, I think your two shots, especially the one with the little baby Morris era, looks like very, very pretty. I mean, is there anything you changed from I mean, there must have been a load of stuff, but is there anything you like, particularly you maybe changed? Or was it more just balancing out because I remember the trees needed a bit of balancing that we got from environment, using position passes and things like that. Was that kind of the main thing you did, or was it the little leaves falling that helped sell the shots?
No, I think it's always the first person to work on it, the first person who has to define how everything is supposed to work and look is always the one who takes the hits. So once all the technical issues are solved from all the departments, it gets easier once the sequence progresses in the tech kind of state of the shots. And I was lucky enough that I had a pretty shot that I could work off from, and I just optimized and I spent my time making it pretty instead of making it work. So I think it's just a difference in the moment where you pick it up and how much was done before. And since we already had a pretty nice look diff on your shot, it was kind of easy to just go from there and continue. and all the fine tuning of the positioning of the sun, of the shape of the hills, and everything else. I spent most of the time on those aspects, and I didn't need to worry about making it work in the first place, which kind of happens. It was a massive shot, like the whole sequence was quite massive, and there was a lot of things that we needed to take care of, and you pretty much went in first and took the beating, so I could focus on making it pretty.
What, by the way, for those of you that aren't in the industry, what Matthias basically said there very politically is, yes, my shots did look better than yours. That's what Matthias, which is true. I mean, the thing was the sun was super low on the car, and I remember it was just a pain because it didn't look very good in lighting when we did that on the environment. So that was the kind of the trick with it. I mean, actually coming to that, because originally I think the plan was with the shots that they would use plate grass everywhere, because I remember prepping out and painting out some little markers on the floor on the grass. And it was like, oh, actually, Josh, you don't need to do that anymore because it's all going to be CG. And it's like, oh, okay, that changes everything. With that in mind, I remember you did a test before they did any CG, where they were kind of like cutting out the grass and you were putting it on cards in Nuke's 3D, which looked better than I thought it was going to be. When people suggested that, I was like, I don't think that's going to look, but it actually started looking pretty good. What was the process like in that? Did you just do some frame holds of different frames and then patch bits of grass and literally put it on cards? Was there any more to it, and why wasn't that chosen, that technique?
Yeah, so to give a little bit of context there, the movie was shot mainly during the pandemic, and a lot of the VFX work was also done during the pandemic, and there were certain constraints on set. Since the whole sequence is pretty much a magical, mystical forest with magic creatures and very pretty colors and very saturated tones, it didn't quite work out because the main plate that we got from the shoot was done in a very dry environment in the middle of summer. So what we did, we tried to make it work in the start with what we had available from the plate. The camera move that you see in the final shot is still the same that we had in the original master plate. So this was unchanged. But the further we went and the more we heard from the client what they want to achieve and what they try to go for, we pretty much realized that there is no way to really get there. But with the first test, we did exactly that. We pretty much took small patches of the grass. We put it on like hundreds of cards. We scattered them across the ground and tried to pretty much create a little bit of a nicer foreground grass area as well, and to help also patch up areas that didn't have grass at all. So it kind of worked okay-ish, but it was just not what the client wanted to go for in the end. And I do think it made a lot of sense to, after like first round of quick tests, to move over to a full CG shot and continue from there. So it was a nice try, but it just did not achieve what the client wanted look-wise. And there was a lot of development from where it started and where it went to in the end that we would not have been able to do with the original plate.
I mean, I guess that's the kind of thing that on one shot, maybe that works, right? But when you've got a whole sequence of shots and everyone's hand placing grass or using nuke particles to scatter the cards of grass on, it starts getting a bit like, guys, I don't know if this is the most efficient way to do this. But that's super. I mean, I guess the interesting takeaway from that is knowing when to hack the thing, and it's worth trying at the start to hack the thing. Yeah. And then, hey, look, we've got a whole sequence, and I don't think this is a viable situation with all the sequences, especially with the Jeep running through. I mean, it would have been, I think your shots, you can't see the Jeep, right? Whereas if you had the Jeep, then doing all that kind of stuff, it starts getting a bit intense. Hand grid warping little blades of grass every time a Jeep goes over. That's not fun. So I guess another thing that you did was is basically you were kind of designing the look, right? So you were designing the look further and pushing it further. Did the plants change at all while you were working? So for instance, the plants out of lighting, did the colors change or anything like that? Or was it kind of pretty much straight out of the gate? Because I'd imagine you'd had crypto mats for their assets and the materials, etc. So you could select that stuff.
Yeah, so I think the lighting renderings looked quite different. The original brief was different than what the end result turned out to be. So the lights direction and everything changed quite a bit. We mainly used all the utility passes and light groups to rebalance to the new briefing and to the adjustments that were requested. So if you would compare the lighting slab comp to the final comp output, it looks quite different. There is also pretty much a split of areas, and the far background, for example, with all the mountains and the trees, it's a massive environment that we needed to split off from our main renderings. Otherwise, it wouldn't have worked. There are like 20 million instances of trees. And it was just such a massive rendering that we needed to go with Clarisse instead of our usual Arnold pipeline. And it was more about making sure that everything still works together and to use all the utilities that were available. So a lot of the things that were adjusted were mainly done with cryptos, with PMATs, and I think we did everything that was possible, and we went a little bit rogue sometimes with the approaches, but in the end, the most important thing was always to make sure that whatever we do is transferable to the other shots. The sequence had a few of those, and we needed to make sure, since all of them were pretty much full CG, except some of the Jeep and the inside of the car shots. I think most of it was always the same kind of roads to the village. And one of the most important things as well was to make sure that it worked in the sequence with what other vendors were doing. So before us, the sequence, I think, was mainly done by Scanline, and the one afterwards from RSP. So we had to make sure that the start point kind of worked well together with what the others did, and the end point also came nicely together with what RSP did. And I think we tried to find a balance as well to get a nice look out of what we did, but still not compromising the consistency and continuity of the overall movie. So it was a little bit of a balancing act, and technically it was quite challenging to get all of this through, but turned out quite nice. So I'm quite happy with how the whole sequence looks now.
Yeah, no, that's good. I remember a lot of it was kind of carving out little areas of shadows and things like that. And we were referencing a lot of the Jungle Book, I think, originally when I was doing the trying to work out why it looks pretty in the first place. But also like the flower colors and things like that to make them pop, and all this kind of stuff really helped. I think as well, I remember with the walls being quite white, we were kind of trying to silhouette, like make them pop more by darkening the trees behind them and things like that, which obviously helps. And it's just, yeah, when you've got a big, massive green, it's trying to work out how to sell the depth of this thing, right? And you can't just take your depth pass and then lift everything up with it, because that's kind of the easy way.
It needed massive amounts of changes to really make it fit together nicely. A lot of breakup, just using a lot of PMATs to kind of give it a sense of different areas, like just making sure that it's not all very clean, and also putting in some areas that look a little bit different, but not too much, just to give it a little bit of interest for the eye. And we were fighting mostly with the sense of scale of the shots, and making sure that there is a very clear foreground and a nice transition to the far background, which was very far away. It was one of the trickier parts of the shot, but I think in the end, we kind of got it to work together quite nicely. And I think all the PMATs and all the cryptos that we used must have been hundreds.
Yeah, I know.
At the end,
it's hard to be tasteful, isn't it? Because it's quite easy to break the reality of a shot when you can literally select small areas and grade them down or up, and that's where it starts getting dangerous. I think you can really break reality with that respect. Something else I think that helps sell the scale on this one, which something we added, is and you've got it in your shots as well, is the little clouds in the background behind the trees. Just you got a sense of how stuff's falling off and things. I think that was something else we added. But yeah, it's the minute you start hacking in comp in PMATs, it can get a bit dangerous. Also, you don't really know the direction then. It's like, right, you got to just find reference, right? At least you're aiming at something based in reality. So when you're working on a shot like this, if you haven't had, I'd imagine you picked up some of the template maybe that I'd made before. I mean, it wasn't a template, it was more a nuke script that we'd hoped would, when you plug in your renders, would get you somewhere decent. But if you haven't kind of got someone like that, who's like, let's say you're developing a sequence yourself, what are the kind of initial steps you would do when you've got a full CG shot? Because obviously it is quite dangerous when you've got a full CG shot. You can really break everything in comp, because as a compositor working on high-end stuff, you basically need to have access so you can play around with everything, so that, because the render times are probably going to be so long that you need to be able to kind of hack stuff or change stuff in comp if needed. So what are your initial steps? I guess, let's say you get the lighting slap. What are your first steps before your like first daily? Are you just kind of kicking something out that matches the lighting slap just to call the lighters out on if they've graded anything or hacked anything themselves? You remove all of their grades and their lighting slap and daily it, or what are your first steps?
So I think usually after like an initial briefing to just hear what the goal of the whole shot and the sequence is, I just start looking at all the slaps from the different departments, getting all the elements in and kind of reorganizing. I think sometimes the lighting slap comps are really good, and sometimes they have a lot of tech issues that are not going to work in the end. So there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done afterwards, but it's mostly in the beginning to plan and structure the comp, to make sure that all the areas are clearly defined, to have a very clean script that is easily adjustable, because usually with full CG shots, it's a lot of iterating through and tiny adjustments sometimes that kind of make all the difference. So you got to make sure that everything is set up very clearly and very easy to change, and you cannot be afraid of small notes. So if you set up the shot in a way that you are scared that the note might break everything, you should probably reorganize your script and optimize it again. So I think like the main parts in the beginning are just making sure that the base structure is good, that it's solid tech-wise. And then you start going for the look, and you start putting it nicer together. You start adding elements, you start optimizing, and every daily round, you get notes, you implement them, and people tend to sometimes take the easy way out, and they just put like an additional grade underneath. And at certain points, you have created it to death by having like 100 grade notes and stuff. So rather just fix it in the right place, do it correctly in the beginning, and you will suffer less later. And it will also be easier for all the other people that will copy stuff from your shots. So pretty much what you did with all the main environment setup, I copied that thing over, and I just changed it to fit better to what I needed to do on my shots. And then I went from there. So it was pretty much just iterating through until we got the final look, and then again cleaning it up and making sure everyone else who has to work with it has an easy time when they open the shot. I hope they have a very clear understanding of what is happening, where and why. And I think this is especially important with full CG shots, to make sure that it's transferable. And that's why I put a lot of time and effort into optimizing and making sure that everything is clean.
That makes sense. Actually, coming back to the fact that you said kind of go back to the one grade node, I'm a little different sometimes. So for instance, if you get a client note, make everything a bit more blue or a bit brighter. Sometimes it makes sense to go back, but then sometimes I find they might change their mind. So it's just easier to disable it. So what I'll do is I'll make a grade node, then backdrop it and be like, so for instance, my VFX supervisor is called Grant at the moment. Grant, no, 23rd of February or whatever, just so it's there. And then if they like it, then I know, okay, now I can use this. So I was finding I would sometimes make multiple grade. I kind of agree that sometimes what happens is people gamma down in one to make the shot more contrasty. Then they get a note that says make it less contrast. They make another grade node and gamma up. And it's like, if you disable all the grade nodes, we end up at 0 again. And it's like, okay. So I appreciate that. I think, as you mentioned, like, it's knowing when to do the stuff right and when to make it a little more efficient.
Yeah, exactly. It's mostly about finding the right time for the right approach. In the beginning, when it's still more in the look dev phase, I think pretty much everything is kind of fair game as long as it's under control. And until you reach a point where you're actually just figuring out the details and getting to like client nodes, it's just easier if you already before did the changes in the right place. And I didn't mean like stacking them per se.
No, I agree.
It was more like if a specific light, for example, is supposed to be a little bit more bluish, like just do the grade in the light group that is responsible for this area. And even if you have to pre-render this comp again for this specific area, then you just wait until the pre-comp is done again, and then you continue to work on all the other major parts. I think this is just overall a little bit of a better approach, because you just never really get into this major cleanup phase. And obviously a few overall adjustments, this is completely fine, and this is needed on most shots. But I always had in mind that other people will copy all of this. And this is why I made sure on mine that it could be copy pastable. And in the case of the Fox shot and the Morris Hurd shot, I was quite happy because it was quite easy to transfer.
Yeah, it's super important because they're massive shots as well. And we didn't have, by the time the shots had been signed off in terms of look, then it wasn't much time, right? And I think you guys ended up picking up some shots a bit later in the sequence. Like they really liked, I think Marvel really liked that sequence. They actually added some more shots, so it became even more important. So what you're saying is then don't just like luma key stuff and grade it. Go back and actually find the light group that they had talked about. I agree.
Yeah, I think exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then also there's nothing worse than going open up a script that you've got to match to and realizing they've dissolved between like 4 different versions of the bottom. It's just like, oh, I can figure out how to make this work.
If that happens, then I'm getting quite upset, and usually I'm not gonna openly complain, but I will think of just throwing everything away and redoing it. So yeah, I think it's also just important for the team to work in a clean way. And
for sure. And it's the difference, right, between a whole sequence getting done on time and a whole sequence meaning that everyone has to do crazy hours and something just because one person wasn't thinking about that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is, for example, important in a moment like this. We did have a few shots that got added very late, and the Morris Hurd shot was one of them. And we didn't have much time for it. But if the setup would have been garbage, then it would have been really painful, because it is very similar to the other one. The angle is quite similar. It's just a little bit further down the road. And if I would have worked sloppy, or if I would have done a worse job at setting it up, it would have been very stressful. And I'm just glad that this didn't happen. And I think in the end, we added like 4 to 5 shots very close to the end of the project, and since everyone was working in a very clean and efficient way, it was quite painless, and that made everyone's life easier. And I think it's just worth it to invest the time early on to never get into a position where you might break stuff for other people. So yeah, I think that was just an important part of the full CG sequence, and I'm happy that most other people also work this way.
Well, and if you think like this as well, you end up becoming a very valuable compositor to the company, because these look like super intense, tricky shots, and they are, but they're only tricky on the first 1 or 2, right? And then, as you say, like then you as a compo could knock out 10 of these tricky shots. Your company can charge for those 10 tricky shots, but actually you've kind of done maybe 60% of the work on the first one, and then you're just nudging it on the other. So if you can think like that, you might have ended up with the same shots, but it might have taken you 2 or 3 times as long if you'd comped in a slightly different way, which then obviously means that your company starts losing moolah. So is there anything you had to like hack in comp different from like that you maybe didn't get from lighting? It was like, you know what, the grass, okay, we can't hack the grass, but just let me hack this one thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously always aspects that are not working, and this is not to blame anyone. This just happens. There's a lack of time to get everything right in all the departments. So in the end, it's just comp that usually fixes the last issues. As soon as all the major problems are solved in the 3D departments, there's usually a little bit of small adjustments needed, and hacking it. I mean, for example, we did get an anim change request for the foxes, for example, and we didn't have much time to render it again. And it turned out that the small fox on top of the rock was floating a little bit, and since they were kind of combined with the other one, it was a little bit tricky to do that. So there's some cheating going on with warping the legs a little bit down, the rock a little bit up to minimize the warping on both sides. There were mountains whose shape was changed, and also, since the environment was so massive and the shots were quite long, they had a lot of frames, and it was very, very intense for the render farm to get all of this out. A lot of the stuff was just changed in comp as well, and how we did it is pretty much we warped a lot of it. We rotoed certain parts out. We made projections out of them. We made ST maps for certain areas that got projected onto cards in those areas. So whatever could be done, we kind of tried to make it plug and play with just switching out a camera as well. And I think a lot of those things were like the tiny cheats to just fix the issues that were there. Obviously, sometimes with such a massive amount of grass in the foreground as well, there were sometimes some specks that were blinking up. So the fireflies that were unintentional.
I just remembered that.
Yeah. So there were a lot of moments where just on the edge of some grass there was a speck blinking or something, and all of those things I mean, you just have to deal with it and you get rid of it. And there were a lot of tiny issues like intersections between grass and rock or something. And those are all the things that you can fix in 3D. But in the end, when the time is kind of, when it's getting close to the deadline, you just have to do a lot of that in comp as well. And it's just, again, important to make sure that it's going to work on all of them and to keep the consistency between the whole sequence and make sure that there's a clear and easy way for everyone to use those fixes. If it's an intersection between a rock and grass, you're just unlucky. You need to specifically fix it in your shot. But the overall things like the mountain shape changes and so on, everything that can be done on a sequence level should be prepared through a setup that can be just applied by switching out a camera.
Yeah, so for instance, in this case with the mountains, I guess you don't 2D track a picture of the mountains in. You put it on a card and camera track it, and now you, sorry, not camera track it, but have a scanner and render rendering those mountains with your camera. So when you just drop in the new shot cam, it instantly picks up the mountains in the correct place, I guess, rather than hand 2D track it, or 2D tracking the mountain image in, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't really reuse renderings from one shot to the other. It was more like applying the changes from one to the other, but doing it in a more procedural way. So there were just ST maps that did the warping and that kind of did it by themselves. It's just every time the position is the same, so you know where the mountain is. You can just go with all the utilities that are available, and we tried to do that. So we didn't completely switch out a mountain. We just changed the shape a bit here and there to make the framing nicer, to do something. And obviously, if in one shot all the mountains have the same kind of height, and the next one is like 100 meters or 200 meters shorter, like it's gonna look a little bit weird.
Yeah.
So it was just about making sure that it's usable for all of them, and those were just some tiny comp hacks that we did. But overall, the renderings that we got were really good, and it was just adjusting smaller things that came in later on in the process that were pretty much. It was more efficient to fix it in comp than to go back to asset level and then run through the whole pipeline again.
Yeah.
So it's just about those kind of decisions. Where do we spend the least amount of time to get a node done, and then tends to happen in comp. So
I mean, I think it's happening more and more, right? I mean, a lot of the look dev stuff seems to be happening in comp now. And then actually, once you've done the look dev, which I think we might have done a bit, then it kind of, some of it gets passed back to lighting again, just because you can work so quickly. Are you finding that on, because obviously this Shang-Chi was out in 2021, are you finding that on other shows you've worked on since then, it's still the case where it's like, let's try and look dev it a bit in comp, and then we'll pass it back to lighting? Or are you finding that it's gone back the other way now?
So at Trickster, we do have a little bit of a look dev department in a way. It's mostly lighters that are quite good in Nuke as well, that start doing the look dev, and then whatever they apply in comp, they then try to match again in lighting. So we try to keep it in the right spot. Obviously, if there is like a change with, let's say, you just adjust the color a bit with a crypto matte, like we don't need to change the whole look depth and the asset and shaders and everything. So those smaller things we still do. But the look depth department pretty much makes sure that the base is good and that we can work with it. And it's just to aim for a good first level of everything that achieves what the client briefing kind of requires, and having it still flexible enough in comp as well to make sure that everything can be adjusted in whatever possible direction they want to go. So we just try to keep our options open and keep the look depth clean to make sure that we don't have like a heavy script already just to match the approved look. And I think it's just important to make sure that if you start a comp with an asset, that you open up a template of the specific asset that is not already filled with 100 grade nodes. So we really try to get it right in the 3D space if possible, and only do minor adjustments later on. And then obviously it's just about comping it nicely into the shot. So I think there is more and more happening because of lack of time. That's more of it is happening in comp, but I also think it's mostly about what gets prioritized, and also with a lot of vendors sharing assets nowadays. It used to be more like one vendor has like one sequence, and nowadays it's more like one vendor is responsible for one specific asset, and that gets shared, and then you need to kind of get this into your pipeline and make sure it's consistent with what the other vendor does, and still kind of clean it up in your way that it works for your specific pipeline. So it's getting trickier to do it in the right spots, and I think this is a large part of the reason why the comp departments are growing everywhere, and
more hacking.
and there is also a lot of additional quite challenging problems nowadays that weren't quite there before. And I mean, I kind of like it if the 3D stuff is already really good, but obviously it's also fun to drive it into a new direction, to push it towards a new thing in comp. And this flexibility is just pretty much what you gotta leverage to get to the best possible result that hits the client notes.
I mean, the thing is, though, I get a bit nervous sometimes when the lighting's good. I can only mess this up. Whereas if you've got lighting that isn't so good or has been rushed out and they're like, right, look, just go to town ledger, it's a way easier win then.
I mean, sometimes it's a full-on coin flip. Sometimes you have lighting slab comps that are straight up amazing, and you're like, okay, I just need to put a grain on there and that's it. And sometimes you get slabs that need a lot more work, and you just don't know what you're gonna get. But in the end, I think both options are fine. I'm not complaining if I don't have to fix a lot of things here and there. So it's all good.
I mean, that's why I'm an ILP man, and Trickster's the same. Like the lighting was pretty good to start off with. So as a comp, you're just putting like the last 10-15% on most of the time, actually improving the shot and adding nice little details. I mean, I do think as well, it depends on what background your VFX supervisor has. If your background has come from CG, they'll generally try and push changes into the CG because they don't know the power of comp and like what you can do, or they'll just like that because they kind of feel more comfortable in the area. Whereas I think Dominic's obviously an ex-comper, so he was a bit more. I mean, actually, he was pretty good at knocking stuff back into CG, but he knew what you could do in comp, which is good. I personally prefer working with on shows where you've got a comp as an ex-comper as your VFX suit, because it's I feel like you can have a more interesting conversation about what I can hack and what I can't. Whereas sometimes what happens with CG VFX who've had a CG background, they get a little bit like they want to kind of like guard their CG and not let you mess with it too much, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really think there's a huge difference in VFX supervisor backgrounds, and if you worked in comp before you went to main VFX supervision, you just know the pain of getting broken stuff, and you know also the pain of the 3D people to fix certain things, and how much time it would take to fix it in comp. So I think having an ex-comp supervisor, like, I think that's quite helpful in the comp department, obviously, because there are realistic expectations of what can be done. And if you have someone who used to be an asset supervisor or something, I think it's harder for them to understand to kind of get the balance between where it makes sense to do it on 3D level and where it makes sense to do it in comp. And finding a nice balance there is I mean, it's always difficult, but I feel like with compers, we feel the pain the most if the balance is off. So
yes.
But Dominic, who was the main supervisor on Shang-Chi, I think he has very good understanding of 3D in general as well. So he really hit the mark on that project with finding the right balance between all the departments.
Yeah, I like it as well, because you end up, if your VFX supervisors ex-comp, they generally try and guard the compers a little bit and make sure they're getting stuff that actually works and they're not having to hack ridiculous things, right? So, no, great guy. So when you've got multiple shots like this, how do you keep track of them? Like, not in terms of nuke or anything, but if you've got like a notepad that you've got open, I mean, now you're in a comp super role, so I'd imagine there's even more stuff to keep track of when you're in like spreadsheets and things. But when you're a compo, was the back wall behind you like full of notes, sticky notes and things, or how are you keeping track of all this stuff with all the notes and stuff?
Yeah, so I have massive amount of spreadsheets. Even when I was just mainly comping, I keep track of everything. I have a little bit of a problem in that sense. I need to write it down somewhere to be sure that I know exactly what's going on. So on Shang-Chi, for example, I was also responsible for a whole sequence with mostly Morris, and Morris was one of many creatures that we did on that show. And I also had like huge contact sheets that made sure that the whole sequence works, that there is no Morris that stands out in a certain way, and which was obviously quite helpful for the Morris shot in the road environment. So I think like making sure that you have at least like some notes written down and to have a general clue of what you need to do and what you're still waiting for and what the next steps are. I think it's just good to put it in writing in general. People tend to forget. You get like other tasks as well. You work on multiple shots at the same time, and suddenly you're like, did he say like the second tree from the left needs to be a little more green, or was it the third one or so? You always kind of forget like small details here and there. So that's why I make sure I write everything down. I kind of need that. People work differently. Others, they just remember easier. So they don't need that. But I'm very much looking at contact sheets all the time and at spreadsheets where I keep track of everything. It's just my way of working. But it also changes with the position. So the more you go into leading or supervising, the more you need to keep track of things, and there is no way around than having a lot of notes.
You can't memento style it then and just tattoo it onto your arms and stuff as you go.
Yeah. I mean, I hope my short-term memory and long-term memory are in better shape than in memento, but yeah, it's a massive amount of information that you need to keep track of, and there are moments where you need to pause with a sequence for a bit because something goes back. Maybe the post-vis changes again and you need to wait for an update from another vendor. Maybe you need an asset from another vendor and you need to pause it for a bit. And if you don't have everything written down, you will just forget something. And that's why I have everything on paper, or in this case on spreadsheets where I note it down. And I just think it's probably the most efficient way to do it. I haven't found a better one, but everyone works differently. So whatever works, it's just personal preference, I guess.
I mean, it goes back to, again, right, what we were saying earlier about how the fact that you managed to knock out 2 pretty beefy shots quite quick because you were smart about it and templated it. I mean, if you're keeping notes as well, it's another thing that kind of keeps you efficient. Another thing I find is I'm always surprised about how many people rely on coordinators to write their notes down. And coordinators, they will do the best job they can. They're in dailies, they're obviously tracking down what the VFX supervisor said, and they'll then put those notes into shotgun on your shot. But they're not compers. And they might not write in compass speak, or they might mishear something because they're So the amount of times I find just give yourself a bullet point to-do list in dailies, and then you can just, if you've got a bit of spare time, you can go through it. It makes it way, way easier. I also
totally agree. I think this is really important because there is always a filter, and the coordinator obviously does not know the details of how to comp certain things or the details of the shot itself. They keep track of when it's due, what to do, and so on, and they write down notes that they hear, kind of where they have their own interpretation of what was meant when it was said. So I think it's always good to write down the notes in reviews, and then have more like the coordinator notes additionally to cross-check if you forgot something, or if there was maybe something that you misunderstood, where you can then ask the next time again. But there is a huge difference if a coordinator really knows what's going on in a department, or if they are just, you know, from a different department, they're helping out and they're not too used to it. And it's quite difficult if the notes are not very precise. So that's why I really think it's important to write stuff down and not rely on other people to take notes for you, because those ones will never be the same as if you are in reviews and you hear it directly from the supervisor and you write down exactly in a way that you know what you need to do. I think it's just valuable, and it's important to do this.
Yeah, it used to be a nightmare, by the way, when you're in the office and you're in the screening room making notes, because it's pitch black. Yeah. My handwriting's really bad as it is, and I'd come out and be like, "What have I written? I can't read any of my notes because it's like pitch black, and you can't using your phone to try to." Yeah. Now work from home is way easier.
Advantages. Yeah, now with remote, it's way easier, and I think it's a quite a good way to keep track of things nowadays, because as you said, like in a dark screening room where you spend like an hour during comp reviews, it's hard to take notes yourself there. And now with mostly remote work, it's a lot easier.
And what was so obviously Shang-Chi, it was great memories, I'm sure. I had an awesome time working on it. I mean, Ernest and Dom set like a really good like vibe for it. I think it was the first show I'd worked on when I was remote because of COVID, and it felt like the camaraderie of the team. I didn't think it could like be that high, given that we're all remote. We hadn't met really each other before. Like, if you got like a best memory of the show at all, like for me, it was more about the vibe that Ernest set. It was, I think, one of the best 2D supervisors I've ever worked with, just in terms of his technical ability, and also the fact that, yeah, like he just had that, like he was in the trenches with everyone, right? It was like he's one of us, if that makes sense. I mean, so if you got a best memory at all of the show?
I think it's also the thing that impressed me the most, and this is one of the reasons why I stayed at Trickster afterwards as well. I used to be a freelancer mainly, and after this show, I took a staff position, and it was just a very good environment, even though it was during a very chaotic time with the pandemic and a lot of uncertainty. I think they did a very good job at making sure everyone feels integrated and welcome. There were a lot of times where the reviews were so funny that even if you didn't have a shot, you would just join to be there with the other people and to also get a little bit of a feeling of what's going on. And Ernest, who was the main comp supervisor on Shang-Chi, I think he did a great job of having everything in order, making sure that we get the best out of it and still make it in time, which was probably the most tricky thing here, but big shoes to fill. And I think the best memory was just finally meeting him and Dominic, for example, in person. So I'm living in Munich. The main office from the people that worked on Shang-Chi is also in Munich, and seeing them in person for the first time was quite surprising. It's always a little bit different if you're only seeing a person's head all the time from a camera, and then you see a person directly in front of you. It was just very cool after all the time to finally meet them. And, you know, I just got to go to London at some point. So
you got to come over.
So we can catch up there.
I mean, the thing is, right, Ernest has got the capacity to grow a beard in about a week, a massive beard. So he can change completely his facial structure within a week. And I mean, so now you've moved into like the comp soup role. How you find it? Because for me personally, if I moved into the comp soup role, I'd be looking at juicy shots and going, oh, like, I would love to have a go at that. How are you finding that? Are you finding it tricky? Or I mean, it sounds like already you were kind of very good at planning, which is why you probably naturally moved into the role. But I'd imagine there's certain parts you miss. And how have you found the transition to the whole thing?
Yeah, I do miss comping. I see a lot of shots where I'm like, I would love to do XYZ thing on that specific one, and I sometimes see versions where I'm like, I think there is a lot of potential left right now, and I would love to work on a few shots here and there, but I think the transition pretty much meant that I spent way more time in spreadsheets. In calls, making sure everyone knows what to do, what's up. It changed more from problem solving in micro level on a shot to the macro level to make sure that the whole show is fine, and that the continuity and everything is good, that all the shots are going to be done in time. So it changed just the type of work that I do nowadays. But the small amounts of times where people send me nuke snippets where they are like, hey, I have this issue here and I don't know why it's not working. Like, I live for those moments to
finally
out,
I can open up
to figure out how to solve something. And I think this was always my favorite part of comping, just getting something that is not working or that shouldn't work and somehow still make it work and get something pretty out of it. I kind of like broken CG because it also means there's a lot of opportunity to get your own kind of to leave your own mark on the shot. And I just like that part a lot. And nowadays the problem solving is more like I'm just supporting, helping, advising, and I'm making suggestions for the compers if they have tech or nuke issues where they're like, I don't know how to do a certain thing, or something is not working and they don't know why. It's more like dealing with those kind of issues and not with the look itself. I'm more like filtering out the shots. If I think everything is addressed and everything is looking good, I'm pushing it forward to the VFX supervisor. But right now the problem solving part is more on the tech side. And I do miss comping, and I do always tend to keep one shot open all the time that I assign myself to. This is my happy place. Whenever I have a few free minutes, this is where I spend it, and I try to at least do one shot a show. I planned initially to do more, but turns out even one shot is very difficult, and there is a big chance that I won't even finish it. And but overall, Nuke is a very fun software if you know your way around, and is very flexible. You have a lot of options, and you can pretty much fix everything if you know what to do and how to do. And this is just it's like a lot of Legos that you can put together, and you can build 100 million different things out of it. And as long as you know how the system works in general, and if you have a clear understanding of the whole 3D pipeline and compositing itself, then it can be a lot of fun. So I miss that part for sure.
I mean, I think as well, we're very lucky enough to know some super talented compers. And I think if you look at a lot of the really, really good compers, they basically are just searching for knowledge constantly. Like, how can I put these Lego blocks together a bit? And they're looking at other people's scripts and how they tackled the same problem as you. And it's super interesting. I mean, this is the advantage of working for really good companies, right? Like, everyone has to show their workings out. So you can just go into the new scripts and be like, oh, wow, like they did it this way. That's super cool. Is that better than my way? Is it different? Etc. So no, I agree with you, man. The problem solving aspect.
I think this is also the thing that separates good compositors from the best. I think the best compositors, they have an attitude of learning, improving. Their goal is to get better. They usually put their ego aside. They look forward to notes. They celebrate reviews. It's not like putting a shot into review and thinking, oh no, hopefully I don't get any notes, or hopefully it gets approved right away. What will they say to make this thing better? And I think they also have like a very clear idea of how to improve and how to leverage having other good people around. They will open up scripts from other people. They will follow along what other people are doing and see how they solve difficult aspects of their shots. If I see something, I'm like, I don't know how this works or how someone did it. Then I tend to just open it up at some point and I have a quick look and I'm like, this is a nice solution, or there's an elegant one. And I also, even though I don't comp that much anymore, I'm still learning with all the compers on my show. So it's just making sure that you really use the environment you have available and open up scripts, join reviews, listen in, and keep an open mind. And the best composers tend to do all of that.
So moving track a little bit, there's obviously potentially in the next, I think in 5-10 years, given that pipelines are so locked down at the moment and they're just kind of old and they're reliant on older versions of software and things, it maybe takes a little bit longer to change. But I mean, Unreal Engine's coming, machine learning tools are coming. They're already being used to a certain extent at places. Is there anyone that you think people should take? Obviously, they both should be taken seriously, but is there one that you think people should take more seriously or less seriously? Or which one do you think is going to be utilized most? Like, what are your thoughts on both those topics when it comes to nuke compositing?
I think there are a lot of very interesting machine learning systems out there. We are also using quite a few of those at Trickster. They just make your life easier and more efficient, and they help with certain tasks. They make certain things straight up better. And I think it's for sure worth it to look into all of this. And I think it's only gonna get more and more. And the potential of Unreal, like, I don't even think we comprehend right now what options we will have in the future. Right now, the one that I can see quite clearly is for environments. I think there is a huge potential with the new Unreal Reader in Nuke as well to have a more adjustable and more flexible way of doing things. I think there is a huge potential there. I don't know what it will be used for in the end, and people just need a little bit of time to figure it out. In the beginning, when Blink Script was released, like, people did cool things with them, but no one really knew how to implement it properly in a pipeline or what to do it. And then people started to actually use it to optimize tools, and then we got something like the point render engine. And I think it's just taking time to figure out what to really use it for best. And I think this time will come. I'm very certain that both machine learning and Unreal will play a bigger role in the future as well. And it's just a question of do you want to embrace it or do you want to try to avoid it? I don't think you can. I think in a few years' time, you will need to know how to use those things. And if you don't, you're gonna fall behind a bit. And I think it's just a good thing to keep an open mind about those and to follow along. And with the new changes to Nuke as well, with the
Unreal Reader or the
Unreal Reader. Yeah, exactly. And with everything that is available now, I think it's going to be more and more in Nuke. A lot of the tasks that were previously in other departments, I think they will find like a center point in comp where we have the most flexibility to change things. And it's just important to stay up to date there. And the category, I think is a very interesting thing that needs a lot of attention. I think there's a huge potential there.
I'm interested as well, like, if it goes down the Unreal route, whether if there's a lighting change, does the comper do it in the Unreal scene, or does the lighter do it? Or because if you've got Unreal Reader, I mean, another thing as well, actually, with in terms of like companies competing against other companies, if you've got one company that can render 30 or 60 frames a second in a sequence, and the other one, maybe it's taking you 5 hours a frame, you're not going to be able to compete. Like, you just won't be able to compete. Your iterations will be way quicker. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I keep thinking that I'd want Unreal in the foreground, so the environment, and then the background would be DMP, well, the DMP background would kind of be like machine learning, stable diffusion, any image creator, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that, and I think you're right. I think it will come into nuke, because if you think about nuke comping, it's basically just the area that we like collect all the elements that are for the shot. So it doesn't matter. We don't care what camera or how our smoke stock footage was shot. As long as we've got it, it's fine. So if I could just like make myself some smoke stock footage by typing it into a machine learning video creator, then that would, yeah, I'm not gonna argue. I'm not. So you're pretty optimistic about it then, because some people you see are like, well, there's going to be this button you click, and people are going to be able to create a film or VFX out of nothing. I don't think it's going to get like that personally, no. And I think we're both pretty optimistic on the fact that they're just tools. It's going to make our lives easier, and the standard will go up, which means that there's still a massive demand for VFX artists.
Yeah, I think this will just be an additional tool. It won't replace anything. It will replace certain tasks. It will improve certain things, but I don't think it replaces it. If you ever spend time in reviews or in client calls, you just know there are small details that need to be changed and that you straight up can't do right now with any of those systems. It's more like a good base to work with, or it speeds up your workflow. It speeds up things, but the flexibility of doing it proper right now, I think there is no way to replace it at the moment. And I think there will be more compositors in the future. I think a lot of the stuff will move into comp, and with all the options we have in Nuke right now, at some point there will be a lighter who sets the light for the whole scene, maybe in Unreal. I don't know. We will find out at some point, and then we will do the shot by shot small adjustments in Nuke. I don't know what exactly is going to happen, but I think it will just need a little bit of time, and we will find out. And I'm quite sure that this won't go away, and it's just going to get better. So it's better to just embrace it and to be happy that certain tasks are gonna get easier and that they're gonna look better. So I'm excited about this, and we have a lot of this going on at Trickster. So this is one of my favorite parts. In between projects, I get a little bit of R&D time, and we are working on our own machine learning systems, which I'm quite passionate about. So I'm maybe a little bit biased, but but I'm very excited about it. Definitely.
And so this style kind of interview is fairly new in regards to kind of talking to a compo or a compositing super about a shot or shots they've worked on. Is there a shot that comes to mind that you've maybe seen, or even someone you worked with and you're working on the same show as them and you saw a shot they did and thought, wow, that's really cool? Is there kind of a shot or something that comes to mind at all that where you'd like to kind of wish that you could talk to them in this way about their shot in particular?
I mean, I try to do that with the people I work together directly. So I do spend...
You just turn around and talk to Tony Lyons behind you.
That's pretty much what I do. But there are a lot of people with very impressive show reels out there. Sometimes I look at some of them on Vimeo, and I'm just blown away with how pretty those shots are. And I can just imagine the complexity of some of them. I mean, I know how they work, and I see the results, and I'm like, I understand what happened in this shot, and I can imagine how the script looks like. But it's still different to know how it goes from 0 to 100. And there are people out there like Miguel Santana who have like reels that are just VFX highlights overall. And I think there are just so many different aspects of shots that are exciting, and so many small details. It's tough to choose one specific one, and there are shots that are highly complex, and you would never imagine that there is much going on. And if you look at the Nuke script, you will be blown away with how impressive and how elegant people solve issues. And you're like, wow, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen anyone do, and it's solving a small part in the background that you don't even notice as a viewer. And then there are really impressive, really big shots that pretty much are full CG, where you glow. So, it's quite different, but there are a lot of very impressive people out there, and I think I can't put one specific shot there, but I would say Miguel Santana show reel is like,
we're just talking about his whole show. I mean, the thing is, I think you're right. Like at this point, we probably know how to do most. If we open up the script, nothing would surprise us. Maybe there's a few, as you say, like little elegant things. I think it's more kind of, wow, like what was the thought process? Like why did you make that dark, or why did you make that bright? And that, I think, is a
this is the more interesting part. I think the tech side of things, of how exactly it was achieved, it takes more of a backseat the longer you do this, and you're like, okay, I mean, I think I can technically get to any shot result on any shot in a way. But seeing the process of where it starts, where it went to in the end, and what the final result looks like, understanding the decisions that were made to go there and why, and just hearing the thoughts of why certain things were done a certain way, I think this is way more interesting in the end than just seeing a very cool nuke snippet, even though I still enjoy that. So
yeah, me too. When you find a little elegant way of doing something, it's like, oh, I hat tip to you. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I love those moments. Like I try to find as much as possible to kind of keep in mind for the next shows, and as soon as I see something cool, I will also let the people know. So like, this is cool. So keep doing that.
So finally then, Matthias, so if you could go back, start of your career, you're just about to start your first day as a VFX artist, what kind of advice would you give yourself? Now, obviously, you've like gone through all the different roles and you've worked on a variety of different shows. Is there any kind of advice that you maybe didn't appreciate at the start that you appreciate more now?
I think in the beginning, I was more stressed to get projects and credits in, and I didn't appreciate to take it slow. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You don't want to burn out after 5 years because you worked yourself to death. And I think it's more about learning. I spent a lot of time working with people that were extremely good, that I learned so much from, where I'm like, I don't care much about the credits there. There are people that have incredibly impressive IMDb credits, and I'm like, wow, this looks really cool. And then there are people that have projects I've never heard of that have insane skills. And I think it's more about learning on your own shots and learning with the people around, learning from people that are really good. If you have your first shots and you try to just get it done, you kind of worry about finishing something and making sure that the supervisor likes it, to getting to a point where like getting it done in a nice way and then getting it done in an efficient way. You just move through all those stages. And I think the learning aspect is way more important. So a good work environment with people that are really good and passionate and are also willing to teach and that are enjoying to teach, I think this is way more important than collecting credits in a way. And I just see the whole thing as a long-term, like no deadline goal. I want to get better at this in all the aspects, and I'm still learning every day, and I'm learning from people that are way better than me at certain aspects. I think I'm well-rounded in most aspects, but there are people that are just insanely good at very specific things, and those are the people I try to learn from. And I think as a junior, or if you really just start out, it totally makes sense to talk with people with experience and to open up their scripts and to see what they're doing, to learn from them, to get an actual feeling of how to approach all of this and to learn to understand why they did certain things. Like everyone can copy paste something and it works if it's a nice template, for example, but spending time on understanding the template and spending time to understand the tech behind it and the ideas of why certain things work a certain way, I think this is going to be the better thing in the long run. And it doesn't matter if you are like really good at the start already and or not. Like after a certain amount of time, if you put in the effort, I think there is always a chance that you are also very good. And it doesn't have to be right away. You can take your time with things, and it's more important to be happy and not burn out with this, and continue doing that in a healthy and reasonable way. And if you really are stressed to get to ILM or Veta after 2 years of working in the industry, I think your priorities are wrong. I mean, obviously those are amazing studios and the people that work there are insanely good. But if you stress yourself and have like only the sprint mindset, then I think you probably won't make it there, because you might crash before. And if you just take your time and you get good at it, you will naturally get to the same point. It's just gonna take longer, but a career has to be long and healthy. And if you want to do this in the long run, and I plan to do this in the long run, I don't have stress with doing any of this. So I think it's just important to put time as a relative thing there, and to just consider to put learning as the highest priority, and not just results and credits.
No, I agree. And also, if you're proactive about learning, the results will come. Whereas if you just focus on whether you'll be and do nothing, then you're going to be super frustrated because you're never going to get there because you're not improving. So no, I completely agree with you. Completely agree. Thank you, Matthias, for talking to me today about your shots and about everything else around being a compositing supervisor. This is the first one. I think it's gone okay. We'll see. We'll see what the foundry think. So thank you again, Matthias.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm looking forward to who you invite next.
I know. I think it might be Tony. I'll have to drop him a message and see if he's up for it.
Yeah, that's a good choice.